We are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. We have a 3-day weekend ahead of us here in the United States as we celebrate Labor Day on Monday. Labor Day has long been called a dirty commie holiday on the right, but I say we take it over. Socialists and communists hurt American workers. They don't help them. So we're going to talk about what does help the working class. And I'll give you a hint. It's not universal basic income and government-run grocery stores or letting criminals freely terrorize our cities. So yeah. Also, Cracker Barrel's Uncle Hershcel has been liberated from the clutches of millennial brand design teams, and we will talk about how lower gas prices and energy prices at large also help American workers. We are going to talk about all of this in episode 508 of the In the Tank podcast. All right. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast, guys. I am Linnea Lueken, your host. We also have today Sam Karnick, senior fellow at the Heartland Institute. Jim is out of the office today, you guys, but we do have a special returning guest, AnneMarie Schieber, research fellow and managing editor of healthcare news at the Heartland Institute. So thank you so much for joining us, AnneMarie.
Oh, my pleasure. Always fun to be on the show.
And Sam, how are things going in your neck of the woods?
Doing quite well. And how are you doing, host?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I noticed that our audience here has noticed the brilliant design of our thumbnail today by Donald Kendall. We are taking, Cracker Barrel decided that they don't want this logo, and they spent like $30 million on it. So we figured that we ought to make sure it gets some use at least once. Anyway, before we get started, you guys, if you want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up to like this video, and remember that sharing it helps break through some of YouTube's suppression. Even just leaving a comment helps us too. If you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review. All right, so we're going to jump right into it. I've already started talking about Cracker Barrel, and that is our first topic of the day today. I wanted to title it Justice for Uncle Hershcel, as that is the character that the logo is based off of, a real relative of the founder of Cracker Barrel. So everyone on social media the last week or so, the last 2 weeks probably, saw how Cracker Barrel attempted to rebrand themselves with an embarrassingly bland logo redesign to match their very bland new interiors. Many people have rightfully pointed out that it looks more like a Crate and Barrel than Cracker Barrel. No one liked it, not even Democrats. Well, it turns out that cyberbullying works, you guys, because Cracker Barrel has apologized and is keeping the original logo. So I have this from the Post Millennial. And Andy, you can keep this video running. You don't have to bring up the post-millennial thing. Yeah, this is the redesign, guys, of Cracker Barrel. It's just, yeah. Anyway, so Cracker Barrel will be going back to their old logo after heavy backlash over its rebranding. This comes after President Donald Trump also put pressure on the restaurant chain on Tuesday. Previously, after initial backlash, the chain apologized in a statement on Monday, but stopped short of changing back the official logo. But it would keep Uncle Hershcel on road signs as well as on branding on their locations. But obviously, now they are totally getting rid of the new branding, except for probably these redesigns of the interiors. Before I go to our panel here, I want to point out that some of the discussion around this issue was centered on the fact that the Cracker Barrel CEO, a lot like the Budweiser fiasco, wanted to try to court a new demographic. Instead of road tripping families and grandparents and stuff looking for a comfortable pit stop, Cracker Barrel wanted a younger kind of brunch going crowd. That's why they put mimosas on the menu despite being a dry restaurant for decades. And I would understand that motivation, but my question would be, why would I or my peers go to a Cracker Barrel that's trying to look like a First Watch when I can just go to First Watch or any number of trendy restaurants that have some variant of like broken egg in the title, right? So this is not the right tactic. The only good thing about Cracker Barrel was the kind of kitschy decor and, the atmosphere. And the reason that they're failing is because they lowered the quality of their food, not because it was too cutesy of a restaurant, right? So AnneMarie, I'm going to go to you on this first. Do you like Cracker Barrel, and how much do you hate the crate and barrel design?
I gotta admit, I thought Cracker Barrel was out of business. And so, I mean, I can understand. I'm kind of puzzled why this drew the attention that it did, and the attention of the president and the stock market, because companies do update their brand from time to time, and that's never been controversial. I guess what I think is going on is we've become very hyper sensitive to any change, because the changes that we've seen recently have gone beyond rebranding to pushing radical departure from our values. And I think this was sort of emblematic of what was going on here. And yeah, I mean, to redo your whole branding thing, I mean, branding 101, marketing 101 is sometimes don't go after new markets, just do what you're doing better and get the people who are in your market to buy more. So why they didn't go to that tactic instead of, trying to make themselves look like Crate and Barrel or whatever, was kind of a mystery to me. I thought at first, it was a racism thing, but it wasn't even that. And so, Trump's talked about, Trump is a marketing genius, right? So when he speaks, he gets a lot of attention. And I think that's what, I don't know whether he spoke before the stock market or after, but, like him or love him or hate him, he is a marketing genius. And when he speaks about this stuff and tells a company to do it, they should listen, because he's been very successful. I think this was really a cry against modernism, and companies would be wise to take note.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, the logo change there and like the interior design change really isn't about like Cracker Barrel itself. It's about the blandness and kind of sameness of all of the companies that we interact with every day. And it's not like I want my life to be driven by just like, well, what brands are cool? Are they neat or not? But I think it does have an impact on like the culture when every single company out there has the exact same like minimalist, app ready logoing and stuff. And it's just, I don't know, it's kind of like soul destroying in a weird way. Sam, what's your thought here?
Well, our economy is built to have bigger and bigger corporations, bigger and bigger companies. That's just the way it works. I'm not saying that's good, because I don't think it is. So what happens is, though, that these big companies, they're going to employ people who are with the program. And so what they do is they get these marketing geniuses who have been all been to the same schools and all have learned the same things that are untrue. And so they end up just doing the same thing as everybody else. Whereas Cracker Barrel only grew in the first place because they were different from other big corporations, big corporate enterprises. They weren't much different from a small local restaurant, and that was the fun of it. That you could get a consistent small local restaurant type of experience anywhere you're going on an interstate. So then they decided, well, let's do this cheaper. and freeze all the food, and microwave it and so forth. And that's I think that started it was very strong starting in the 2000s. And so I think before that it was basically fairly fresh food, just like you would expect in a small town restaurant. So they got rid of that, because that way you get your margins cheaper, you get better margins, profit margins and the like. So this is how big corporations work, and it's not the way people really want things to be. We want things to be authentic in this century, and I think the reason we want them to be authentic is because so much is inauthentic, and the corporatization and big government have made that happen. And we can turn away from that anytime we want. And I think that this whole Cracker Barrel controversy was based on that issue.
Yeah, I want to point out one of the questions brought up by one of our viewers here from Chris, who says, serious question, would they have used focus groups to check how they like the changes? Supposedly, they had an expert focus group. They didn't just like poll random, American drivers on the highway, who would make these kind of pit stops. They have like marketing expert focus groups. So the problem is, I think a lot of times the demographic that's making these changes are highly educated women who probably live in urban areas, and they are focus grouping on highly educated men and women who live in urban areas. They're not going and grabbing like Southern, some random Joe Blow off of the street and saying, do you like this instead of the old Cracker Barrel? Inevitably, the answer would be no. And we saw that online, like the second, and it was even Democrats too. This wasn't just, right wingers bullying a company into submission. It was everybody bullying a company into submission. It was a niche crowd that they're trying to cater to when we already have all sorts of options. Like, I don't hate the general, like, minimalist, cutesy brunch restaurant, like clean, like I said, First Watch and stuff. Those are okay. But I wouldn't go to Cracker Barrel for that.
You don't need to.
Yeah. They should have put together a focus group of truck drivers, because truck drivers have incredible opinions, and they have very strong opinions because they listen to a lot of radio and talk to one another, and they're very knowledgeable. They see everything, right? That's what they do. They drive from, coast to coast. And I bet they would have, I don't know if they're the demographic that goes to Cracker Barrel. It seems like it's more the family type of customer that they reach out to. But, again, it was probably an AI-driven focus group where they came together and came up with the best mix of people that were going to give them the best impressions for what they should do. And, I just, to me, it was stunning, the reaction that it got, and that it happened so quickly. I mean, look at how long it took Bud Light to finally realize the huge mistake it made.
There's a certain amount of CYA, I think, in the way they approached this, which was that, okay, well, we'll get recognized experts. These people went to Harvard and Yale and Princeton, and so therefore they know what they're talking about. Whereas if you ask truck drivers what they really want, then and it doesn't go well, then they could say, well, you see, you asked a bunch of truck drivers. You didn't ask people from Harvard and Yale and Princeton. So there is a certain amount of CYA and expertocracy in particular in this whole process. And we have to remember that the customer is always right. If they don't like the food that you're making, changing the logo isn't going to do a darn thing. And all you're going to do is get a worse crash. So Fix the food, Cracker Barrel, fix the food.
Well, and you're sorry, AnneMarie, you go.
Maybe we're missing it. I mean, think of all the publicity this generated for that restaurant, and how many people now are going to, just out of curiosity, maybe stop at a Cracker Barrel when, here I was. I didn't think they were still in business. Maybe the joke is on us. Maybe this was some big marketing schema. They knew the backlash would be there, and they got all this free publicity.
Yeah, I mean, their stocks took a pretty big turn when
that was a risk. That was kind of a risky move.
Yeah,
but
Anna's right. The president said Trump said, make this into a publicity stunt.
Yeah.
That's basically what he told them. So you're right, and it can work that way.
Yeah. And, when stock drops 10%, it has to climb 20% to get back to normal. So, it's a big risk to take. But nice to know that we still have a reactive stock market.
Yeah, Trump's advice here was basically, you guys should pretend like this was the plan all along. You guys should just go back to the old logo and say, look, we listened to you guys, which is essentially what they did. They went back to the old logo. They said, we are listening to our customers. We are keeping things the way they were. But hopefully they improve the food, because that's the big thing I think that was driving people away. Like, yes, they shrunk their biscuit size and they aren't making them fresh anymore and all sorts of stuff like that. So nobody likes that. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on this. And this next topic we're also going to spend just a little bit of time on, because we are going to drive right into our main, kind of overarching umbrella topic today. So topic 2 is America First energy policy helps everybody. It keeps gas prices low. With all of this in mind, the whole theme of today's show is just helping the American working class, right? Cracker Barrel is a American working class eating establishment. Americans are still struggling with high utilities across the country. I wanted to give a brief highlight here to energy policy impacts that the America First energy policy has been having so far. But like I said, people are still struggling with high utility prices, especially in the Northeast. But that's largely due to a continuing overpenetration of, renewables, which are expensive and unreliable. However, gas prices are coming down. The Daily Caller reports that gas prices for Labor Day weekend are the cheapest in years. They say drivers are expected to see the cheapest Labor Day weekend gas prices since 2020, according to Gas Buddy. Gas prices climbed under former President Joe Biden, shooting up to record highs in June 2022, with a national average per gallon price nearing $5. Labor Day weekend gas prices are projected to average $3.50 per gallon in 2025, the lowest since 2020 when compared with the $3.16 in 2021. So we have a quote in this article from a friend of Heartland Institute, Mark Morano, who said, "It is not due to unexplainable phenomena that U.S. gas prices at the pump are finally dropping to 5-year lows. It's clearly due in large part to the Trump effect. Over 200 actions since President Trump's inauguration day to free American domestic energy supplies is starting to pay off. Actions have good consequences, as these pro-energy policies have resulted in U.S. oil and gas production reaching their highest levels ever in the summer of 2025. So, guys, we have a lot of people here who view this show, who also view our Friday show, which is focused on climate and energy topics. So, who here would have guessed that, not restricting supply and giving the oil and gas industry their head and some confidence would result in lower gas prices, right? Sam, I can't think of a single thing that helps Americans across the board more than keeping the cost of energy as low as is feasible, for us and also for producers. Of course, they have to make some money to keep working, right? But if the trend continues under Trump, food costs, other things that rely on transportation should also come down too, shouldn't they?
Yes, absolutely. It's simple supply and demand and the currency. We've been debauching our currency for since the beginning of the 20th century, and that's what drives prices up more than anything else. And because energy is a very volatile area, you find that oil and gasoline prices can go way up very fast, then go very, very, very quickly down as well. I think one thing that's important in terms of tying this into the Labor Day idea is that you can't have workers without work. And in order to have work, you have to put resources, capital resources, into that work. And it doesn't matter whether it's the government putting those resources in through socialism or the free market putting those resources in. There will have to be resources put to these things. So every system that develops products is a capitalist system. That's a given. So the key thing here, though, is that if you reduce the costs of inputs, you create more and better jobs. And that's what that's one of the most important things that happened during President Trump's first term, was that the cost of all kinds of inputs was reduced. The way that was done was by lowering the cost of energy, which he did in a variety of ways, which everybody pretty much knows about, and also lowering the cost of the inputs by reducing regulation, and not just on energy, but on all areas. So this is a process that must continue now, must be renewed. And as you said earlier, or as Anne said, you have to get a 20% bump after you've had your 10% loss. That it was a much more than 10% loss of American productivity during the years 2021 through 2024. And that was a terrible situation. So we need to do a lot of work to get back to the trend line we were at. But that is exactly what the policies of the current administration are all about. So yes, very big plus. And it's great, as Trump would probably have a more vivid way of saying this, but it's great for the American worker.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent example of supply and demand. And I don't know why this message just doesn't get through to the general public. I mean, leave energy alone, including price and supply controls on gasoline. Let the free market be the regulator, where we all get to vote, we all get to choose. I mean, this is what democracy looks like. The customer is king. And energy prices are volatile, like Sam said. People make decisions for economic reasons mostly, and that's why we should never mandate or incentivize with tax dollars alternative energy options. And we're not just seeing this in gasoline, but energy supplies in general, closing down coal plants. I live in a state that has a zero net energy plan or net zero energy plan, where they want to be on alternative sources on everything, I think by 2050. And, they're incentivizing things like solar panels on rooftops, which are an incredibly expensive alternative to, getting off the grid. And where I live, we don't get a lot of sun, and people aren't going to spend tens of thousands of dollars on things like solar panels if they don't think it's worth it. And energy prices go up and down because our needs and our demands go up and down. And so that's why it's best to let the free market figure out the prices and decision making when it comes to energy. It is the oil in the machine. It drives everything that we do. And when we have government putting its hands in there, trying to control everything falls apart. And so I am just so pleased to see that people can get in their car and save money driving to their destination and stopping in a Cracker Barrel that looks like the original and have a nice time this weekend.
Absolutely. And that's why, Labor Day gas prices have been kind of something that the media has been interested in reporting on every year as long as I can remember. It's a major vacation weekend, and so everybody wants to know how much it's going to cost if they go on their big American road trip for this long weekend. And I think that, a lot of the elites in this country who, make enough money that they don't have to budget for gas don't really realize how big of a difference it makes to, the average American when it's even just a couple of cents extra per gallon. Especially for people who have to commute to work every day and stuff. Like that's a big deal. That's, you can save that money and go to Cracker Barrel a couple of times. So you can, it can go towards all sorts of stuff. And I'm sure that a lot of our audience has their own stories of, ways that this kind of savings can help them. And it's a big deal. It's my point earlier with regards to the food prices thing too is another aspect that we're going to kind of touch on with the government-run grocery stores later today. But here's Jim in the audience here. He says hello from the Ohio Turnpike. Yeah, Jim is traveling, so he's actually our example right now. I'm hoping Jim will stop at a Cracker Barrel for us, and we'll send pictures to chat so that we can show them on there. Jim, it's time. I've just decided where you're going for lunch. So anyway, so now that we've kind of given like one example of how you can help Americans, which is giving the oil and gas industry, giving our energy industry its head so that they can make costs as low as feasible. We can also talk about how not to help American workers. So first, I'm going to, yeah, thanks, Chris. Jim lives under a teapot.
We've had some cutbacks here at the Heartland Institute.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to give, because we have a lot of international listeners, I'm going to give them a little overview on what the heck, a Labor Day is. So in short, it's a holiday celebrating supposedly it's a holiday celebrating the economic achievements of the American working class, right? However, it was initially promoted by union activists and was made a federal holiday by President Grover Cleveland in 1894 after a whole bunch of protests and strikes for years by workers that wound up getting violent, especially in 1894, like the famous Pullman Railroad strike that resulted in, deaths of workers and stuff. So it was a tumultuous time in American history during the Industrial Revolution there. So it is something of a labor union holiday. And so because of that, it's often claimed by socialists and their ilk, and the rest of us kind of make irritated noises about its origin while enjoying the day off. But I say that the socialists don't get to claim that they are the party of the working class. That's the main subject of our show today. So I want to start by taking a look at a great article written by our very own Justin Haskins for Heartland's Stopping Socialism website, which I highly recommend everyone go to. We have a whole series of articles on the history of socialism and on, why it doesn't work. It's a great read. And so in this particular article, Justin points out that the initial fatal flaw of Marxian socialism is this great little illustration where you have this chronically lazy factory worker. So Justin writes, in socialism, for a nation's productivity to remain all the same, all workers must continue to produce at the same rate without financial incentives as they do with financial incentives, or else the entire economy's productivity inevitably will decline. So the workers watching a lazy coworker, Lazy Bill, benefit from the same amount of wealth every week as they do would need to continue working at a high rate out of some altruistic desire for the community, nation, or the world, not because it's in their own best interest to do so. Wherever such a model has been imposed on a large scale, productivity has nearly always fallen, absent of some other motivation, like fear of war or violence. And the reason is obvious. When the lowest performing, laziest workers receive the same wealth as the highest performing, highest and hardest working individuals, there's little, if any, motivation for most people to work as hard or harder than the most productive employee. Instead, the entire factory workforce only needs to work as hard as the least productive person. Put simply, the entire socialist economy is a race to the bottom. And the main point of the socialist economy is also always compulsion at some point, because it has to be, right? So, Sam, why won't workers just patriotically contribute to the Great Red Machine forever?
Because they don't have to. It's that simple. And Justin makes that point in his article, which is that if you don't have to do something, then you won't. Now, because you have to ask the question, why do we work? Why do we work? Do we work just because we just love to do it? Some people do. And some people, but if, there were no jobs, if there were no, if the economy were simply all done by machines, there are people who still would work because they would work to get more power over one another. And that's where government comes in. But the reason we work is because we want to get things, we want goods and services. And the only way to get those sensibly is to trade for them. And even in socialist countries, even in communist countries, that's how it works. People have to build things and do things and trade for those things. So the fact is that unless you're required to work, most people aren't going to do it, but very few will. And so that's why That's why we work, and that's why socialism doesn't work. Because unless you have the incentives matching the rewards and the rewards matching the incentives, then you're just not going to get the effect you want, which is more people working harder. They're not going to do that. And it's a very simple thing. It's human nature. Why would you work more to get nothing extra?
Well, that always reminds me too. Whenever the discussion of like socialists and communists and whether they actually love the working class or not comes up, I think of two things. One, I think of how in Gulag Archipelago, it's talked about how as the farmers or as the factory workers and stuff failed to meet the expectations of the Communist Party, they were blamed, or they were accused of being wreckers on purpose because they weren't, like magically producing things the way that the communist regime wanted them to produce them. And so immediately the ruling class of the Communist Party turns on the working class that they claim that they cared about. But now it's like, oh, well, these guys are actually part of the evil system that we're trying to break down because they're ruining the great communist image of the future or whatever. And it also reminds me of that Stone Toss comic where a socialist guy is like, I'm for the working class. And then like an oil field guy is like, ah, shucks, thanks, and holds out his hand to shake it, and the guy like recoils in disgust. That's the like picture that I have of especially American socialists, but really it's across the board. AnneMarie, this is something that the Heartland Institute has worked on for a long time, trying to explain why socialism doesn't work, even though it sounds nice, oh, well, we'll all just get, in terms of Marxian socialism or communism, more or less equitable outcome. And everyone will just magically work for whatever job it is that they would most like to do. Which, as Justin points out in his article, is crazy because we need sanitation workers. And if given the choice to be either a sanitation worker or, I think Justin's opposing job that he proposed was like dusting donuts at Disney World, I think most people would choose the latter. And there's just not enough dusting donuts at Disney World jobs to go around for everybody to make their career that. So why is it that this stuff is so appealing?
Because you cannot, the thing about socialism is you cannot coerce virtue and goodwill. It has to come from the heart. People have to have a reason for doing things. And sometimes money is a good enough reason. Maybe you want to take better care of your family or whatever, or donate more money to charity. About 8 years ago, I did a video. It was my most successful video in my entire life, and I've been around for a while. I had to do a video on this thing called the Children's Business Fair, run by an organization called Acton. And I was working for an organization. We rented out space in a hotel in Detroit, and we invited students to come in and set up their little mini businesses. And then we would publicize it, and people would come in, and the kids could make a lot of money. It was to teach kids how to start businesses and so forth. And it was charter school students, and it was very successful. But we did a video, and we pulled the kids aside, and we asked them basic market economic questions like, what are you going to do with the money that you make? And every one of the kids who answered would say, I'm going to give some of it to charity, most of it to charity. This one girl told me all the charitable organizations she was going to give her paycheck to. I said, aren't you going to keep any for yourself? And she says, oh yeah, I guess I have to do that. But it just comes so naturally to kids. The other question we asked was, do you think people should be forced to buy your product if it's not good? Do we ever see that in this country? Of course not, right? They're like, no, because you didn't work as hard, or maybe you didn't use the right products or materials, or you didn't price it right. It was stunning. And we called the video Free Markets So Easy, Even Kids Can Do Them. And such a natural thing for people to be motivated. You don't have to force people to work. If you leave them alone, if you don't try to control the market and try to make up for other people's laziness, they'll get it, but the free market is just a magical thing. It just works so wonderfully. And we end up screwing it up with all the regulation and all the do good policies that we just don't get the best outcomes.
Well, I want to tell the audience, definitely worth it to read the article by Justin there. He goes into a lot of stuff. He even goes into talking about why he actually gives Marxists and the philosophy itself a very fair shake. I mean, he's not straw manning it or anything. He says, in fairness, a lot of communists would claim that communism hasn't really been tried or hasn't really succeeded anywhere. When you show examples of like Cambodia and Venezuela and stuff, communists will always say, well, that wasn't real communism. We didn't succeed at that there. It was some like kind of corporatism or something, actually. And in fairness, Marx's vision of communism has not come to fruition anywhere because it's not possible. So it is a fair shake to say that. Anyway, we are going to see probably, I think it's very unlikely that this individual does not win based on all the marketing and stuff that has happened. I'd be pleasantly surprised if he didn't. But we have this article from Breitbart, just as an everyday, like a real news example of socialism getting pushed again in America. So the Democratic Socialists of America admits socialist Zoran Mamdani gives them the best position to seize state power. So the DSA is admitting that New York City mayoral candidate Assemblyman Zoran Mamdani, I'm really sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right, gives them the best position to seize state power, moving the party further to the left. That's what we need, a wider gap between the left and the right. DSA leader, organizer Daniel Golden made the remark during a panel discussion. He made it clear that DSA has been involved in his campaign, which has come under fire for vows to fight back against the work of the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement while pushing ideas such as government-run grocery stores. DSA, he continued, actually wrote Mamdani's platform alongside him and has what Golden described as regular meetings with him, let alone his team. So that's nice, but it's not surprising, right? He's talked about like seizing the means of production in New York and stuff like that. So, I mean, Sam, what's going to happen if this guy wins? Do you think he's actually going to be able to implement much of his, kind of extreme policies there? Do you think that kind of the general machine of New York will stop him from doing that? Otherwise we might get an interesting little mini case study, right?
Well, it remains to be seen whether he will actually even be elected. There could
Yeah.
be some cooperation among opponents to make sure that that doesn't happen. But I think that he would be able to implement some of the things that he wants to do. I don't know about taking over the grocery stores. I'm not sure that that's liable to happen. But the problem is that this isn't going to help workers. It doesn't help workers to take away resources from their employers, and that's really what you're doing when you are removing the economic incentives from things. You're removing the incentive to do things in the most efficient way, and that's why when you have a government-run grocery store, there's no food on the shelves. And as famously would happen in the Soviet Union, you couldn't get toilet paper. You just couldn't get it. So what would happen is you're just going to reduce the amount of resources that go into all of the work that goes on in New York City, and you're going to lose jobs that way. And what will happen is that people will simply leave that city. They'll probably leave New York State as well, because why stay there? So it's a great idea, I think, for depopulation of New York City. You can get that done, but it is a kind of fantastical scheme you get from a person who was born basically into royalty in a foreign country and comes over here, and he has no experience whatsoever, even lifting 135-pound weight off his chest. So he's never done anything except, have these fantasies about ruling the world, which is what his parents were doing in Africa. And so it's just it is certainly a mad plan that he has. And I would imagine that the Democrat Socialists of America are largely people more likely to be people like Mamdani himself than they are to be like an American worker. I'm sure there are people there that support that party that come from the working world, but I think it's mostly sort of dreamy-eyed or dreamy intellectual types who just don't have any kind of grasp of reality.
You've probably seen the videos when he won the primary, and it was just a bunch of elite millennials in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
He does not draw a broad base, but those are the people who are living in New York City, who are supporting him. They like their big fat paychecks, but they rarely calculate the costs of what it takes to live in New York City. I mean, under this guy, it would be a free-for-all. Rent control, which we already have in New York, and you have a black market of then subleasing and renting out rooms. It gets so bad there that people, the rents are so sky high, and they're rent controlled apartments generally. You have people who are renting out rooms just when they go on vacation, just to pay the rent, and they're drawing big paychecks. And, they can't afford cars, right? Because it's astronomical to drive in this city, let alone the price of gasoline is just not even on their radar. And so, they never leave the city. They think they're self-sufficient there. But, government run grocery stores. I mean, you're going to see, they love their trendy restaurants and their, food shops, and those are going to be competing now with the government, and they're going to be taking up space, and you're just not going to have the selection, all those things that draw young people to cool cities like New York. I mean, I guess we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but the apartment situation, living situation, everybody gets paid more to live in New York. But, you're paying something like the income tax, I think in New York City, where was I looking at? It's like maybe 5 to 10, almost up to 11% for certain income groups on top of the New York State income tax. And then to drive in New York, you got to now pay a congestion fee, let alone the $1,000 you probably have to pay to park the car each month. It's just, they don't calculate these costs. There are just all these apartment buildings in New York that don't even have elevators or laundry facilities. And they're like, $4,000 a month for a tiny little, 300 square foot apartment. And it's just going to get worse under this guy because there are a lot of policies in place. Look what they did to Uber. They tried to drive Uber out of town, and now you can't get there for under $50, a half-mile drive. So it's going to be more of the same. And I don't know. I just hope they wise up.
You said that they don't calculate these things, and you're absolutely right. And the reason they don't calculate these things is because they've never had to do it in their own lives. So to them, it's like, oh, well, who cares?
Yeah, well, and the ironic thing about the wealth flight, right? Because that's something that Democrats and socialists in London and in New York, all over the world, they say that doesn't happen. That's not going to happen because we'll get them a exit tax, and then they won't leave. We'll just trap them here. But it does happen. It happens anyway because they just find another way to get the money out of the place before they leave, so that then the tax is, not hitting them as hard. So, but the people who really suffer under these conditions are the people who can't afford to escape them. And that's their target group that they just suck dry, are the people who are making enough money to get hit with the taxes, the working class people who are working, but are not making enough money to go and move out of state easily and pay whatever weird exit taxes and stuff they have. So again, the socialist program is not pro-worker. The socialist program is pro-socialists.
Well, yeah, and the policies are driven to force people to live in the cities. I grew up there, so I mean, I'm a little bit familiar with the cost of living there. It is so expensive to commute every day into New York. Just even taking the train, it's like $20 for a train ride back and forth. You can't take your car in because the parking is so exorbitantly expensive. Then you pay the congestion tax or whatever it is, the tunnel fees, the tolls. So kids all live there, but then you're competing for all this rent-controlled apartment space. And then you have another little black market, and that, is also driving up the prices. So it's really crazy. And yeah, I mean, I know people who are in that age group who take their laundry home to their parents because they can't find a place to wash their clothing. I mean, it's just crazy. And, I don't know.
Yeah, this video that's showing here is a city-run grocery store from Kansas City that flunked. We talked about it, I think, a couple weeks ago on this program. But yeah, no, they just didn't have anything. And it turns out that having a free grocery store actually, or not a free grocery store, but like a city-run grocery store actually doesn't stop people from just continuing to steal when you put them in high crime neighborhoods, which transitions us into our next topic. Which is how to actually help American workers. And one of the major pillars in that is crime and reducing crime. So, all right, there is a problem. There's one thing that the communists, the socialists, everyone is right about, is that there is an economic problem, especially for the working class. So fewer and fewer people of my generation and younger are able to achieve the American dream. And it's not because they're eating avocado toast, okay? It's a lot more complicated than just my generation doesn't know how to spend their money. And that's, for some people, that's definitely part of their woes, but it's not the society-wide issue here. Sam, you posted a Substack article going over a lot of this, but I'm going to pick out some key points here and I want you to expand on them a little bit. One of the things that you point out is that the US economy is not serving middle income people the way that it used to. You cite a Zero Hedge article that outlines 5 milestones of adulthood that people used to make by age 25 or so. And those are living away from your parents, completing your education, getting a job, marrying, and living with a child in the home. So in 2023, 17% of young adults actually achieved those milestones. So I just want to make it clear to the older people in our audience that this isn't just a laziness issue. You have some loafers, some stupid millennials on college campus, whatever, but that's not the majority. I mean, I have peers who have had to apply, and I had to apply for hundreds of jobs to get just one or a handful of interviews if you're lucky when you were looking for, your first out of college job. So what's going on here, and will socialism help it? Sam.
Well, socialism definitely won't help it. So we can set that in stone right now. What happened? Yes, right. I think what was really interesting about this whole discussion of the millennials not reaching their milestones of life. The milestones, it was something like 50% were reaching those milestones by the age of 33 or 34 in the 1970s. And this is the mid 70s. Now, in the mid 1970s, crime was going up very rapidly. And the crime rate nationwide peaked in about the 90s, late 80s and early 90s. So what has happened is that as crime has increased, it has made it so that the decent neighborhoods where there is less crime in urban areas, the prices of the rent or buying a house have skyrocketed. And so what happens there is that, remember that when you're younger, you make less money and have less money in your savings than when you're older. So older people get the better houses. They can also move to the suburbs and so forth. And younger people have to take the higher risk of living in neighborhoods that are not as well kept, not as well organized. And because of that, they're not as well protected. And because of that, they're less expensive. So because they have less money, that's what they have to do. Now, people like Mamdani don't have to do that. They can live wherever they want. So what happens then is, yes, you see the crime rate there. People are talking about how, crime is coming down. Well, it's been coming down for about 30 years now. But look at where it is right now. It's still well above double where it was in 1960. And in 1960, crime had already been increasing. Remember, crime was increasing during the 1950s. But that said, double the crime. So right now, crime is about, violent crime in particular, is about at the level it was in the 1970s, which was considered at the time, if you look at any history or watch some Dirty Harry movies or whatever, that you will see that crime was considered to be out of hand in the 1970s, and it is out of hand still today. And it is not decreased. The decrease has stopped, and it stopped with Ferguson and George Floyd and all those incidents, the Baltimore incident. So what happens then is you make it much more expensive for young people to make a living and to get the things that they want, in particular housing. So now you're a young person. What happens? The moving out and the getting a job, they're doing those at the same rate as they were before. They're not lazy. They're not bumming around. They're not sitting in their parents' basements. What's happening, though, is they're not getting married and they're not having children. And why is that? Because marriage and children are enormous financial commitments that are basically lifetime. And Anne probably knows this just as well as I do. Those commitments do last a long time. And so you make it much, much more expensive to have a normal middle income life. And that drives people away from getting married and having children. And that's another way that you're going to depopulate New York City, all those big cities. So this is one thing that I think is a underappreciated fact, which is that crime is hurting working people very badly, and especially younger working people. It's a national scandal, and I'm glad that we here at the Heartland Institute have the opportunity to tell people about this and get this in front of them so that people can start to, well, let's say raise a bigger stink about it, because we really do need to solve this problem. And there are very simple ways of doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just crime in communities, but it's crime in workplaces, violent crime. I mean, let's look at what has happened in the last 6 weeks. We have had shooting deaths and violence or attempted random murders at 2 office buildings, a church and a school, and 3 retail outlets just within a 6-week period. Hospitals now are seeing escalating violent shootings in hospitals and ERs and parking lots. And what is the common thread here? Well, it all leads back to what we have is kind of socialized medicine in our country, where we pay. This is another thing where millennials and younger generations get screwed because they are paying an arm and a leg for health insurance they don't need, right? They're subsidizing all the walk-ons for insurance, and it's driving costs up. And where do we see all that money going? To big hospital centers, hospital CEO salaries. We're running hospitals like corporations, and patients are, we have hospital systems that look at patients with money signs on them, and they, get them into care and give all kinds of treatment because somebody else is going to be paying the bill. And so what we have as another factor of rising violence is untreated mental health problems. We see this all over the place. We have rising cannabis use. President Trump, you look at every one of those 6 incidents that happened in the last couple over the summer, all of them, every perpetrator, there's a common thread. The families were screaming for help for their loved one. They couldn't get it. And they all had substance abuse issues, cannabis, namely. I think the guy in the New York City shooting, they found marijuana in his car. And nobody, Alex Berenson talks about this quite a bit. We do not know what that drug is doing to brains, and who knows what other medications they might be taking. And it's really difficult for families to get treatment for loved ones. I love the idea that Trump is using the military. I think it's a great, putting military enforcement in cities, because it sends a strong message that cities are safe and that he, is taking crime seriously. I know that the narrative has been, oh, why is he doing this? The crime rates are dropping, but not violent crime, right? All you need are a couple of incidents to really scare people away. And so I think it just is calling attention to the issue. I would be in favor of Trump putting out an executive order on what to do about the mental illness crisis that we have in our country. Families cannot get around privacy laws to help their loved ones. They can't get treatment. There are not enough beds, and not everyone needs to be an inpatient, but maybe we need to do things like, involuntary outpatient treatment. That's been very successful in some places. We have socialism running our healthcare system, and we have so much untreated mental illness. And we just, the current policy, the Obamacare policies and Medicaid, expanded Medicaid, are just not addressing it.
That's certainly a lot of factors that go into this. On the topic of the crime issue, there's an article that Sam, I think you posted to the chat, that was a Committee to Unleash Prosperity look at a study that came out from the University of Colorado. I think that we brought that up on the screen earlier, but we can bring it up again, showing that, cities with high crime rates have subsequent higher rates of poverty, lower rates of employment. And the professor actually gave recommendations to mayors and city councils. And what he said is probably something that we'd be pretty well on board with too. And his recommendation for how to make this stop is to focus on ensuring respect for private property rights. That's number one. An effective police force, prosecutors willing to enforce the rule of law, and fair courts. This will enhance economic prosperity of your citizens and diminish poverty in your cities and states. I think that this is something that is the most frustrating to, average Americans, is that we have all these laws on the books, and it just seems like none of them are being enforced, right? Or a lot of them aren't being enforced. You hear all the time about this, some guy who murders someone, and he's been in and out of jail like 50 times on various violent cases that got pleaded down to like a drug charge or something. It's crazy. And there was a video going around. Actually, sorry, Andy, I should have put this video in the list. I didn't realize that I was going to think about it. But there's been a video going around from some of the arrests that have occurred in DC since Trump's been using the National Guard, federal police in a federal district, to arrest, these like repeat offenders. And there's this one guy that they interview, and he is saying like, I know I'm just going to go to jail. They're wasting their time putting me in jail because I'm going to be out in a couple of hours anyway. And we've seen so much of this. It's mind-boggling. And it's like, I know that, if someone like me who doesn't commit crime goes and does, God forbid, commit some kind of a random crime or whatever, you just feel like you would end up getting thrown into jail for the rest of your life for something, when there's a whole like slew of repeat offenders who are always getting out and always, committing crimes again. And a lot of this, I think, has to do with some of it's a mental illness problem, but some of it is just the like prosecutors just not caring problem, or they have like a weird view of how like the causes or the reasons behind crime. And they feel like if you don't punish people as hard, then maybe they'll, take that second chance and that third chance and that fourth chance and that fifth chance and stop doing crime. But repeat offenders are repeat offenders. And it's so frustrating. It's hard to even articulate. Yeah. Thank you. It is I too says they would let me out of jail. Thank you.
Linnea, I will confess that I regularly commit thought crimes.
Oh yeah,
so
well,
we do have that. But if you could you just pull up the chart once again, because I want to point to something.
Sure.
Right?
Which chart? Your chart or the chart from the
chart from Unleash Prosperity?
Okay.
And because I think it tells us a very important story. It's because there's a narrative in that chart, which is that if you look at it, it says the current crime rate and the future poverty rate. And what that is saying is that, and this person has done a a brilliant thing, quite frankly, because people say, well, it's you get an increase in crime because you have so much poverty and people just need to rob one another in order to get to make a living. It's a bit of a bizarre argument, and always was. But if you look at it, they're talking about the current crime rate and then future poverty. Okay. And so what that means is that the crime is causing the poverty, not the poverty causing the crime. And this is something that we've known in history. So you have the current property crime rate and it's future poverty rate. Exactly. So the crime is causing the poverty, not the other way around. And this is something that normal human beings have always known. And so what we've done is we make it very difficult for a city to have a decent economy because of the crime. And so every time you do that, every time you ratchet up the amount of crime, you decrease the resources within that city. And of course, what you're going to do then, you're going to get less tax money too. And then you're going to say, well, we need to take that money away from the police because, well, we can't take it away from the welfare system. So you get this basically downward spiral of fiscal trouble. So, but I think that is such an important point, and I really want to stress that. And I guess I have.
Yeah, Andy found the video for us, and I want to say too, this is like one of the easiest ways to fix crime in a city is to actually put in jail the people who are repeat offenders like this. Because so I have a friend who's an attorney, and he I won't say what state he works in, but he's a prosecuting attorney, and he said that in his state, all of the crime in his town, all of the crime in the city that he works in is committed by like 20 people over and over and over again. It's the same 20 people committing thousands of crimes, like an unbelievable amount of crime. And he said if you arrested those 20 people and actually kept them in jail, crime would dive like 87, 89% in the town.
It did dive during the 90s.
Yeah.
When they started putting people in jail.
Yeah.
Yep. So we can play that video. It's a repeat offender guy explaining his position.
The judge is literally going to say we're going to put him on a 3-day hold. Then once the 3-day hold is up, AnneMarie never shows up. I done been over DC jail 6 times for the same warrant. They never show up. DC jail has to release me. They release me. It's the same thing every time. The same thing every time.
Yeah, his complaint was that it's a waste of time to arrest him at all, which was pretty funny for the lead into that video.
It's like, why are you wasting my time arresting me?
Their careers, though. They don't have jobs, and it pays for them to do this, right? They don't. And, the idea that we put people in jail is to protect the public, right? To keep the public safe. This has become a lifestyle for people. I would argue that they get a night off the street when they're living in jail, right? Free pay. I mean, free rent.
They won't get shot.
It won't get shot. It's become a lifestyle. We've enabled all of it.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. So I don't have too much to follow up on this with, except that, fighting crime is really one of the ways to help people, obviously. Will really help local economy and stuff. You people locking me up. Yeah. And, not letting it just languish forever. We have laws on the books. Okay. We don't need new laws. We can enforce the laws that are on the books now. Our prosecutors can prosecute the judges can actually, uphold and make sure that people actually get their due penalty. And this ties into Trump's, hard on crime policy that he's had in DC, which is normally, humiliatingly is one of the highest crime locations in the country. Carjackings are insane there. They've gone up like 400% since COVID. And they've just in the last couple of weeks plummeted 87% just by having the presence of officers who are actually following through on arresting people. So yeah, we don't have to live this way. We actually can just put people in jail. If you guys have any closeouts on this concept.
Well, I do think that it's an important point that the the carjackings and the murders. The moment you actually start to enforce the law, people start to obey the law. How simple is that? And yet we have these fantastic notions that somehow we're going to build a utopia, and everybody, to go back to Justin's point, will be virtuous and do exactly what they're supposed to do. It doesn't work that way. People operate according to the incentives and to what you teach them through those incentives.
Yeah, I agree. Our cities are in sad shape, and we're locking our, most productive segment of the economy in cities. They can't leave. They can't afford to leave. Yeah, something's got to give.
So I'm going to close us out here, guys, with reiterating those recommendations, which is private property rights are essential for people to be able to feel secure in living where they live and being able to invest in their, their local economy and everything. An effective police force helps with that. Prosecutors actually enforcing the rule of law, and courts that you feel like you can trust in. All of those help across the board. And socialists are and have proven themselves to be against all of those things.
What?
So yeah, that's unfortunately, you guys, that's all the time we have today. Thank you everybody for your attention to these matters. Once again, we are live every single week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Sam, what you got for us this week?
Okay, go follow me at Twitter at @STKarnick, and by all means, visit the Heartland Institute website. I'll leave it to Anne to give you a certain thing that it's at the Heartland website, but also my Substack is stkarnick.substack.com.
All right, AnneMarie.
Yeah, healthcare news. It has been a fire hose of news every day, a major development, and the free market perspective is very important to keep in mind. So if you want to get all of that, find out what's going on, check out heartland.org and go to healthcare news.
Please do that, you guys. It's such a great resource. And I'm going to answer a question from the chat real quick here. Someone asks, is there a climate podcast tomorrow? Yes, there is a climate podcast tomorrow. So please tune into that, you guys. For audio listeners, please rate us well in whatever service you're using and leave a review. Thank you so much to AnneMarie for joining us and to our usual panelist, Sam. Have a great day, you guys. Have a nice long weekend, and we will see you guys again next week.
Sounds good.